I'm Mark R. Hassan, and welcome to the first podcast for BHA+, a new media channel set to formally launch in the coming weeks in tandem with an overhaul of my filmmaking site, bigheadamusements.com. But before I provide further details, I think it's best to offer a brisk overview of prior podcast series, which will continue to be available via Libsyn and other fine hosting and disseminating services. When my review site kqek.com needed a little bonus content, I started a series of periodic interviews and pieces centered around the site's film, TV, film music, film festival, filmmakers, composers, and once in a while book reviews. Additionally, interviews with painters and photographers and mixed media artists were showcased on my occasional podcast series, Artscope TO. Both podcasts have not been retired. They'll reappear as subjects meet the requirements of each series, especially as kqek.com is itself relaunched close to November. But over the coming weeks, I'll be posting some images and video, small teasers of the contents that'll be standard to BHA+. My mandate for BHA+ is reviewing vintage video gear, spanning analog consumer, prosumer, and broadcast gear, and how to integrate them into a digital workflow for experimental and narrative works, as well as video art. Blogs and podcast versions will be supplemented by test footage, how-to tutorials, and special content that'll be exclusive to Patreon subscribers. And there will be historical pieces to help trace and contextualize some of the video formats, the mixers, the processors, the editors, and the ENG broadcast gear, plus tube and CCT cameras going as far back to the mid-1970s, and more. In 2012, I started filming a short experimental documentary on Toronto's best video store, Bay Street Video, and I went down a ridiculous rabbit hole buying a lot of chunky gear that at present fills up a storage locker. So there's arguably a few years' worth of gear to showcase, if not set up a community-style cable access TV studio from the 1980s or early 1990s. Not that it'd actually go that far. The documentary, titled BSV 1172, will eventually get a release digitally and on VHS and Betamax, and maybe SVHS and Betacam SP. But you can read some of the early making-of posts that go back a bit on the documentary and other vintage gear at bigheadamusements.com. In a couple of weeks, I'll post the mandate for BHA+, which includes interviews with artists and historians and users of unique video gear. But let me step back to the late 1980s, when I started film school at York University. Its 4-year film production program had students using still cameras, Super 8 film, and 16mm film. York was one of several universities, colleges, and institutes in Ontario, offering young filmmakers and multi-talented artists tools to create. And it's perhaps fitting that the first podcast for BHA+ is an interview with composer, musician, producer, performer, and filmmaker Spookey Ruben, who also happened to attend York after pausing a burgeoning progressive thrash metal music career. Full disclosure, because he began his studies at York as I was in my last year, our discussion hovers a little bit on the film program and some of its eccentricities, but I think it all relates to Ruben's emergence as a musician-filmmaker. Most artists have several skill sets and interests, and Ruben's videos, which he crafted with care and youthful verve, are both snapshots of a medium that in the mid-1990s became an important commercial art form. And if done with honesty and humor and dexterous rule-breaking, a music video could, and often did, work as a dynamic calling card when Canada's Much Music and America's MTV showed actual music-related content. Ruben's song These Days Are Old launched his solo music career in 1995, leading to an album from TVT Records, and the video is packed with performative and technical energy that typifies the genre, at least when artists are having fun playing characters in disguise, donning eccentric hairdos and makeup, and leaping, running, somersaulting, crashing into, and time-shifting through connected or completely loony locations. Throughout our roughly 40-minute conversation, I've interpolated several of his songs and film music extracts in almost complete form, partly to contextualize, as well as tease the curious into checking out his videos, which are archived under TV plus film at SpookeyRuben.com. Ruben's songs are tightly crafted gems, with his voice remaining locked in smooth, youthful tones. Whether it's the gliding vocals in These Days Are Old or Mr. Everywhere from 2017, finesse is a constant. And as a solo artist, he's released 11 albums and multiple singles. His film work includes directing music videos and episodes of Spookey Ruben's Dizzy Playground, a series of 7 shorts, including PUZZLEFACE, which features British director and naughty provocateur Ken Russell in one of his last screen appearances. Since September 4th, Spookey Ruben's 2024 tour has moved through the US before landing in eastern Canada, starting in Fredericton and Moncton, New Brunswick, and Halifax, Nova Scotia. Thereafter it's Montreal, Quebec, and Toronto, Ontario, before hopping across the Atlantic pond to Germany and stopping in Berlin, Hamburg, Hanover, and Ossendorf. Ruben's Toronto gig is on Friday, September 13th at Basement 254. That's 254 Lansdowne Avenue, and is presented by Daniloff Productions. Further details of the Toronto show are discussed at the end. So let's begin our conversation with Terra Magnifica, the intro to his first solo album, Modes of Transportation Volume 1, originally released by TVT Records. In your bio, it says that you went to York University.
Yes, I studied film production.
What years were you there?
1990 to 1993. Unfortunately, I dropped out in my 3rd year, which was probably one of my biggest regrets. At the end of my 3rd year, too. If I could have just stayed 1 more year, and then I would have had a degree, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But what happened is, in my 3rd year of university, I applied for a music video grant from Much Music, and I got it. It was a $9,000 grant to make a music video. And in my young mind, I thought, oh, this is amazing. I don't need to, I've already made it. Like, I don't need to go to university. Like, this is what you'd want to get anyway. You know what I mean? So with my arrogance, I kind of dropped out of university to basically pursue being a music video director. So in order to get the grant, I actually recorded a song, and that was These Days Are Old, which is my first song, first music video as Spookey Ruben. And then the video, when I first finished the video, which was probably end of 1993, I think I finished the video. The video started playing on City Limits, like at night on City TV. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that show?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so it started playing on City Limits, and even right from the get-go, it started getting kind of a buzz. I mean, the word buzz meant something completely different back then, but it was like Network Records reached out to me, and they were like, well, do you have any more songs? And I was like, more songs? Like, I hadn't even really thought the whole thing through in terms of me being like a solo performer. I didn't really, in terms of like having a demo and all that stuff, I wasn't really that prepared, I specifically wrote more songs for Network Records, and I recorded 3 more songs, which were quite different from These Days Are Old. They were more darker, they were more psychedelic. I mean, I was taking a lot of psychedelic drugs at the time, and it was definitely more of a, These Days Are Old comes, from, if you only know that song from my catalog, you'd probably think it's a very, I guess it's a very happy song, from the outside, on the surface. Anyway. So then I made more songs, and then Network Records didn't really like my other songs. So then I just sent it out to like 20 other record labels, my demo with my video, and then TVT Records discovered me, like just from me sending them my tape. You know, that's kind of how my whole music career started, you know.
So when you applied for film school, like, were you already doing music, or were they just sort of happening in tandem, a hunger to make something filmic as well as crafting songs?
So in high school, I was in a sort of progressive thrash metal band called Transilience, and we actually did, I mean, considering our age, we like went pretty far. Like, we even got like a record contract offer and all sorts of stuff. And we opened up for some big bands like Corrosion of Conformity, and this is when I lived in Washington D.C. But I think something happened where I kind of felt like I just had a different idea of. I didn't really see myself as just like being a guy in a band or something, and I was getting out of the whole punk and metal thing and getting more into, like, I'd say more visual oriented bands like let's say Cocteau Twins, or more industrial like Skinny Puppy, just bands that were a little more ethereal and or super heavy on like visuals. You know, I kind of switched from watching Headbangers Ball to 120 Minutes, you know what I mean? Like on MTV, and I got more into like Einstürzen and Neubauten and just the really like super arty kind of art bands, you know. That kind of led me to thinking that, you know, I wanted to study film instead of music, really. I got more into the visual side. And then at film school, you know, I guess I kind of got back into music again. You know, that's kind of like a lot of times it goes that way. You want to do one thing, and then everything kind of circles around again. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. The way that your songs are structured, when I hear them, I mean, it sort of sounds like perfect material for a music video, because it's got strong underpinnings to it, and all you need is a particular concept, and those visual ideas just sort of come to mind.
I think the thesis or whatever, you know, to get into York University, my sort of artist statement, you know, what I explained to York University is that the reason why I wanted to study film is because I felt like, I was talking about how I think the music video format is the ultimate format, because you get music and visuals at the same time. I would just watch music videos. I knew every music video by every band, regardless of genre, and I was just super into bands that had cool videos, you know, great. And to me, that was like, I felt like that was the ultimate format, you know, and it's like, and that's basically, so yeah, I mean, you have a point. I mean, I think my music is primarily inspired from music videos, you know, really. I don't know what happened, but it seems like people really stopped watching music videos, you know. I mean, as you know, I mean, MTV doesn't really show music videos anymore. And then even myself, I kind of lost interest in music videos, but I feel like now I'm starting to get back into music videos. For a while, I also kind of agreed with like the general opinion that music videos are boring. I don't even know how that came about, but then I feel like music videos are kind of, in my mind, are actually getting more exciting again. Even older music videos, like I just remember I went through many years of just thinking, why would anyone even want to watch a music video? Like my whole idea or ideal of music videos got jaded. But now I feel like it's coming back again. I don't know. I remember when Michael Jackson came out with there's some of those, or Janet Jackson also, like some of these videos are just became so memorable. And they were using new techniques, and there was always this, and then they'd make a big deal about, you know, announcing, oh, you know, the new Michael Jackson video is coming next month.
I'm trying to remember the name of the show that City TV had, the Top 10 Countdown or something, and you'd always wonder what video has been unseated by the newest video that came out. And I'd tune in every week because, like you said, the videos were kind of the ultimate way to experience a song. You had the artist performing, you had artists in unique situations, but maybe what sort of happened in the passing years is that a lot of videos kind of just got overproduced, or maybe there was much more of an emphasis on plugins and heavy style, and kind of the musicians themselves and their personas kind of got lost in the process?
I haven't thought about it. I mean, I feel like it would be cool to kind of like try and figure out like what happened, like where did that art form kind of lose its, you know, its appeal. I mean, but mind you, you know, there are people who do still watch music videos. You know, I'm maybe not a good example, but, you know, I think I do know that people on YouTube, you know, people watch music videos on YouTube, for sure.
I wonder if it might also be the fact that YouTube has kind of become this giant archive of pop culture. So you get to see older videos as well as more recent videos, and they kind of just intermingle. So maybe the fact that so much of that is available there, that inspires musicians as well to think, well, why don't we do something like that? And they can also pick different styles that maybe haven't been used in a while, or different elements. Instead of being overproduced, they might do something simple like, I think in one of your videos it has sort of like a video game appeal, like the little drummer boy, or which I thought was hysterical.
Sound of big thing now.
They told me, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum, a newborn king to see, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum. Our finest gifts we bring, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum, to lay before the king, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum, rum-pa-pum-pum, rum-pa-pum-pum. So to honor him, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum, when we come. Little baby, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum, I am a poor boy too, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum. I have no gift to bring, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum. That's fit to give the king, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum, rum-pa-pum-pum, rum-pum-pum-pum. Shall I play for you, pa-rum-pa-pum-pum, on my drum?
I think what's cool about music videos is that it's your chance to sort of like put on a different mask, you know, and I feel like if you're not excited about what you're doing and you're kind of like just rehashing the old stuff or rehashing your look or your sound or whatever, I mean, I feel like, you know, you're not really doing what you're supposed to be doing. I mean, I feel like usually like the first album or first couple of albums of a young band is always really what's the most exciting stuff, because the band is excited about it. The band is excited about having an image and being out there and being something or making a statement, you know. But what happens is that, you know, after an album or two and making a bunch of videos and going on tour especially, I think that really burns out a band. It burns out the band, and then when it comes to album number 3, it's like the band members they all hate each other. They don't know why they're doing it anymore. They don't know what excites them anymore. In fact, they don't want to be excited because they just want to stay home because it's just too much stress, you know, out there. You know, you when you're touring all the time and you're trying to make an album, it's incredibly stressful. I guess for me as a solo musician, it's good and bad. On the one hand, I don't have a whole team of people to work as like an army, like to kind of like get out there. So I don't really have a massive support system, but I'm able to kind of decide what I want to be excited by, and it's not like a group decision. As a solo artist, you know, through music videos and just trying to find something new that excites me visually, musically, is easier when I'm an independent solo artist, you know.
whether it was before film school or maybe during film school, were there any kind of sort of aspects of filmmaking, animation, experimental perhaps, or certain filmmakers that struck you as being really important to your work and ones that have sort of stayed with you all these years? Because I remember that when I was there, we would have, for example, there would be sort of film history or film theory in the morning, and then after that there would be these different modules for film production. So besides production planning, there was editing, there was cinematography, but they tried to sort of, you start maybe with something more classic film history, and then you would go into foreign films, experimental films. Speaking for myself, at the time my tastes were much more general and classic, so anything experimental I hated. And then like 10, 15 years later, love experimentalism, love playing with editing and cinematography and treating layers with different kind of effects and everything. So your taste changes. But there were certain things that I remember from some of the films that we saw, which even if I didn't like it, they still stayed in my mind.
When I was at York, I was definitely drawn to a lot of the experimental stuff, But I liked it all, Battleship Potemkin, and just learning about all this. I'm trying to think, what was the other one? Eisenstein. A lot of those early movies, I think, I felt really had made a real impression on me. There's always certain things I remember about. There was that one Russian film director who did like a World War I kind of. He did some kind of army reenactment thing, and I remember the professor telling me that the director was such a freak that he insisted, even like when it came to the costumes of the soldiers, he insisted that even the underwear, all the stuff was exactly the way that it used to be. Like, so even the stuff that you wouldn't see on camera, he wanted all of that to be original. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I think that was Erich von Stroheim.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Oh my God, yes, Erich von Stroheim, exactly. What movie was that?
I'm trying to remember what it was, because I've only seen a few of his films. I've seen Queen Kelly, which is the one that kind of killed his career, and I've seen what is the final version, I guess, of Greed, which originally was apparently 9 hours long, and the studio kept wanting to cut it down. But he was a fascinating character. He was this, I think he came from Austria, and I don't know if he actually was a true von, if he came from aristocracy, but he kind of passed himself off as that. And he was incredibly arrogant, but he did make his films are the ones that I've seen are just great. And he definitely pushed the boundaries in terms of what was acceptable on film. In terms of provocative nature, and they definitely had this production scale to them as well, because he built, I think, Monte Carlo for one of his films. So you had this giant casino, and all the stuff was built in the back lot. But I remember the story about the underwear, and of course, you had producers thinking nobody's going to see it. Why?
Right, exactly. Now I'm starting to think maybe we had the same prof or something, because that's something that I don't know. So you remember that little detail too, which I don't know, for some reason that just
it's definitely like, was more eccentric ones. His career was fascinating because he made Queen Kelly with Gloria Swanson, and I think the person that was producing it was Joseph Kennedy. And the production was just becoming more and more problematic. And then he apparently did something, as the legend goes, which just had Kennedy saying, okay, enough of this. And he just pulled the plug. The film, I think, was sort of hastily cut into something that could be released. And it was never really finished. And then years later, they attempted to do some kind of a reconstruction of it with stills and some narration. And you get an idea of what it's like. But he definitely had a flair for sort of body characters and provocative behavior, sort of amid this aristocratic characters. I think in first year we had Doug Davidson, who was a producer at TVO, and his background was classic Hollywood. And then in the second year we had Scott Forsyth, and I think his background was political science. I certainly learned a fair bit about, film technique because they would show us all these different editing things as well. And at the end, in fourth year, you got to make your thesis film, and then everybody decided to do that in my class anyways, because we all wanted to have that sort of showpiece. But, in a way, I think you kind of managed to circumvent that whole $15,000 expense that came out of your pocket or your parents or your grandparents by getting a grant, making a video, and having a great calling card.
I guess I wasn't really sure. I mean, not that many people. You would have thought that I would have gotten hired more as a director, as a video director. But I directed maybe 2 other music videos besides all of my own stuff. I directed a music video for a band called The Weeknd, which is not that The Weeknd. It's this punk band from London, Ontario, and for some other guy whose name I can't remember. But yeah, for some reason, no one hit me up for directing a music video. But I'm also just thinking, when you're talking about those professors, I do remember Doug Davidson.
Mm-hmm.
Was it Doug Davison or Davidson?
Actually, it might have been Doug Davison. The best way I can describe him is his lectures were incredibly dry, and then every so often he would freeze, and I always got the impression that someone accidentally unplugged him, and then there was a scramble as they were trying to get that plug back into the socket, and then once they got plugged in again, he would just continue with the rest of the sentence. But because he just would freeze, and I remember one of my classmates actually shouted, "Wake up!" because he had this prolonged pause. But his thing was always classic Hollywood, and he did Fred Astaire musicals and Citizen Kane and Touch of Evil, a lot of the Hollywood classics at the time. And it was a decent selection of stuff that he did. He was just a little dry when it came to presenting stuff. But I think for professors in general, it's not easy to have an engaging personality and to get everybody excited about something, especially when you're going to be sitting there for 3 hours. And a lot of people, as soon as the lights would dim, especially in second year, they would just sneak off and go and have a beer and just come back just as the film was about to finish. So you'd hear the clapping of the seats in the background, and you'd realize, they're back from the Grand Lounge.
Oh man.
I've also noticed that in a lot of your music videos, you also act in it. Sometimes you play a character. How important is that for the video? And is that something that you also have in mind when you're writing a song? That you will probably be one of these characters? Or is there a persona that you like to have recurring in your videos?
That's actually a good question. I definitely want to wear something new. I don't want to wear the same pants I was wearing in the music video before, so I want to wear something different, but I want to be able to justify it. And then usually the solution is for me to kind of like play a character. To me, it's the most logical thing to do. I have to do what I feel is comfortable for me, and I just have fun. I think since I was a kid, I've always had fun, like dressing up or for Halloween or whatever. You know what I mean?
Well, I think a good example to me is Knife in Water, where you play sort of like a Sherlock Holmes character. Just wonder if you can talk a little bit about how both the song was crafted as well as how the video was made.
Okay, well, as a songwriter, at some point, it's like you kind of like, I feel like I've been, in the past 10 years or so, I've been writing more. I'll just latch onto maybe like a story. Like the Knife in the Water song is like it's like a little detective story about like a detective looking for a murderer that's like loose in the city or whatever. Which again is another another escape from just like writing like a love song or something. How many songs can you write about like, I'm so in love and I'm she doesn't love me or whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah. escaped with no trace, just in time. There's only one missing piece of evidence. The knife in the water.
I think it's fun as a songwriter to go more into fantasy or like little, similar to maybe how the Beatles, like some of their songs were fun, like they were almost like children's songs, you know what I mean? And I think as opposed to writing something that's just completely obscure and I feel like I can't really do, I've kind of walked away. I don't really, I have songs like that too where, maybe in this sort of Radiohead kind of way, or Nirvana lyrics where it's like we don't really know what he's singing about. We don't really know what they're talking about, and that's what became very popular in the '90s. A lot of the grunge bands and stuff, they have these songs where it's like we don't really know what they're talking about. That doesn't really interest me anymore.
How important is humor both to your music and your visual work? Because some of the videos are really funny.
Like which one? Which one's funny?
I think it's the I'm trying to think of the last one. It's where I think it's like on a valley near an observatory.
Oh, the Griffith Observatory.
Yes.
That was shot in Los Feliz in Los Angeles, and this is like also this idea where I was going bald. There's this whole thing, like what I hated about all the metal bands I was into when I was younger is like whenever they start going bald, it was like they all shaved their heads. If you're going bald, for some reason there's like this law, this like unwritten law that if you're going bald, you have to shave your head. There's no other choice. And so in the video, it's like an anti-fashion statement where it's like I have a skullet, that haircut is called a skullet. And then I was thinking if I did the skullet, but like in a sort of fashionable way, kind of, that was kind of the idea. How that works with the idea of Mr. Everywhere, I don't really know. I don't actually totally fully understand that, but I guess it was like this idea that, Mr. Everywhere, he's everywhere. He lives in like in multiple parallel universes. I don't know. And then the blue hand and I don't know. it's just trying to mash, just kind of mashing a bunch of different things that maybe consciously don't make sense. It's the mashup of it that is supposed to kind of confuse you. You know, it's supposed to confuse you as the audience member, but then somehow think that it's cool or something. You know.
And then I guess your longest work is PUZZLEFACE. I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about how that idea came, how the whole thing was conceptualized, and the fact that you also have Ken Russell, and I think in what is his last film appearance.
I know, isn't that crazy? That's insane. Whenever I think about that, that's nuts. That's a long story. I'm trying to see if I can make it short. So, PUZZLEFACE is, you know, basically the idea is, let's make a serial killer, a masked serial killer, that's as cool as, like, Freddy Krueger or Mike Myers or Jason, and then kind of twist it into sort of like a rock opera kind of thing. I'm a big fan of the movie 200 Motels by Frank Zappa, mixed with, like, I don't know, Pee Wee Herman meets Tommy meets Monty Python or something. I don't know.
What are you doing, pumpkin?
We knew that we were able to get Voivod to be in the short film, and then the Ken Russell thing was basically, it came through our friend Shade Rupee. I don't know do you know Shade?
Yeah, he I think for a long time he was a publicist, and he's also moved into acting now, but he also did some great interviews.
Yeah, he's an amazing guy, you know. And so he was basically Ken Russell's like chaperone, and he was friends with David Daniloff, and you know, Daniloff was sort of one of the co-writers on PUZZLEFACE, and he's one of the producers also. He had this idea, like, man, maybe we could have Ken Russell doing a cameo, you know. And then Ken Russell was in a wheelchair, actually, at this point, you know.
I think he became a little more frail in his later years because of health issues.
And I just, I don't know, I just remember Shade was Shade was there when we were, so the idea was like, oh, okay, so Ken Russell, we can get Ken Russell to do a cameo, and then it was like, oh, I know, let's have Ken Russell be God, you know, so, because Ken Russell is God, so that's not a stretch.
Mm-hmm.
So then we went to his hotel room, and we filmed Ken Russell we brought a green screen, and we filmed him. He was actually sitting in his wheelchair, and I wrote the lines on a big, massive cardboard for him to just read he was just reading it off the cardboard, you know, and we filmed basically just a head and shoulder of him. And I remember at one point, just right before we were going to shoot, we had to offer them some money, you know, which was, I just remember right when Ken Russell, before he was going to say his lines, he goes, well, hang on, how much are we getting paid for this? He said, he says this to Shade, and Shade is like standing just off camera. And then Shade like walks right up to him and like points to him right in the face and goes, $300. Like, but it was just, and it was just so abrupt. Ken Russell was like, okay. And then he read his lines. And, you know, we probably spent like 20 minutes with Ken Russell. You know, we didn't want to like wear him out. I think we got him to read it 3 times or something, you know what I mean? And then his wife, you know, Lizzie Tribble, of course. Mm-hmm. Lizzie Tribble, yes. I actually became really good friends with her, and she actually came to a screening of PUZZLEFACE in Brighton, England, actually. They were living in England at this point. And Lizzie played a sort of like a naughty nurse kind of character, you know, which is inspired by Ken Russell, you know, definitely. Ken Russell, rest in peace.
Very, very iconic filmmaker and fantastic visual sense. his use of widescreen in films. For me, I think where I really noticed his use of widescreen was $1 Billion Brain, which is a very strange film with not an especially solid structure to it, but it looks absolutely gorgeous, and there's some fantastic, unforgettable sequences in there. And it's all shot in gorgeous scope. But Russell wrote an autobiography, I think it was in maybe the 80s or the 90s. I think it's called A British Picture. And it's a good sense of who he was. He was he kind of characterizes himself in the book also as a very naughty boy. He loved to shock. So it's unsurprising that when you see his films, there's always a poke at Catholicism and nuns and icons and so on. So it kind of makes sense. He would actually be a perfect god.
Exactly. He was right up there with like Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola and all those guys. He was on the same, tier, and somehow he kind of lost his marquee value, diminished for some reason. I don't know why. I guess it's because he didn't really. Well, also because Devils, which is I think probably his best film, no one really saw that because it was banned all over the place. Unlike, let's say, De Palma and these other guys, he never got that sort of massive breakthrough film. Even though he was on the same tier as them in terms of just his vision and his sort of bravado or whatever you want to call it.
Well, I think two of his biggest cult films, I guess, sort of mid to late career, one would be Altered States, which is just fantastic. Oh yeah,
that was probably, I saw that in high school actually. Yeah, that had a huge effect on me, that movie. And I actually, at that point, I didn't even connect the dots that like the same guy that made Altered States also made Tommy. But that just goes to show how wide of a spectrum this guy had, he knew his shit in terms of like classical music and world history. He was a very literate guy,
Later in his career, he ended up making a bunch of films for Vestron, and Lair of the White Worm is still very much a beloved cult film because it's a really cheeky kind of riff on the Hammer horror films, and it's just so, again, like it's filled with all these naughty Ken bits. You have snakes and crosses and nuns and huge phallic symbols. So he clearly had fun making it, and I think that joy comes out in the film, and I think what may have been written off as sort of a direct-to-video film that barely got any play, or a movie that just sort of went straight to video and didn't get much theatrical play, kind of found its audience. And I think maybe the fans that saw that film started to look back at some of the other stuff that he did and notice that he had this really fascinating career going all the way back to the BBC when he was doing documentaries on composers. He obviously had a huge understanding of music, its impact visually as well, and I think you see that in his films, especially Altered States.
I agree 100%.
I guess one of my last questions then would be just about the tour that you've got. On Instagram, you've got a little snippet of sort of the percussive effects that you have along with visual triggers. I wonder if you can just talk a bit about some of the visual elements that are going into the show, which incorporates a lot of different elements.
Right, well, my East Coast tour, and then I've got like 2 or actually 3 shows in Germany following that East Coast tour, is basically, it's a solo tour. So it's I'm playing, there's 3 different elements to my show. There's me just solo and acoustic guitar, like a singer-songwriter playing my songs on guitar. And then I'm gonna mix that up, and then I sort of break that up with a karaoke element. I'm gonna have a selection of music videos that I'm gonna sing to. So people will see my music video in the background, and I'm singing to it in the foreground. And then the third element is this apparatus that I've designed called Crash Bang Theater, which is a drum pad MIDI video triggering rig where I'm triggering video clips using drum pads on 3 different TV screens. My show kind of starts with like a a video wall, and then it goes into this more serious kind of songwriting thing, and then I go into the drum pads, and then it ends with the video again. I just kind of like, personally, I'm just kind of like, I like singer-songwriters, and I can sit there and watch, people sing and play guitar, but for me personally, I find it kind of boring, and I kind of want to mix it up again. And, without the band, the only way I can do that is if I kind of bring in some other video elements. At least that's how I feel, and I feel like it's who I am is to bring in this video stuff on the stage. Because I'm also a filmmaker. It's that simple.
Bringing it down, around, bending through the hips. Good.
Dally Blue, classically trained aerobics instructor, admirer of Shostakovich, in particular his Prelude to Misery in E-flat minor, currently dating Dr. von Spreckensie-Deutsch.
And we're going to do the sphincter wink, so let's turn around. Great. And we're just going to bring it nice and low, hands on the floor. Excellent. Stick out your glutes and squeeze your glutes together like you're winking at someone from across the room. Perfect, good. Now, let's all rock the Jesus wave.
Spooky's Friday the 13th live explosion happens at 8 p.m. on September 13th at Basement 254. That's 254 Lansdowne Avenue, Toronto. Special guests include Thunderclap, Bell Fountain, The Pickle Fairy, Diamond Pink Lady Devil, and DJ Full Throttle Aristotle. Also making an appearance is Spooky's mascot, O.T. Biggs, last seen in both Mr. Everywhere and PUZZLEFACE. Huge thanks to Spookey Ruben for discussing his film and video work, and David Daniloff and Daniloff Productions for facilitating this interview. Links to Spookey Ruben's music videos on YouTube, plus an archive of articles and reviews, are available at SpookyRuben.com. Samples of his music, including his progressive thrash metal work, can be streamed and purchased via Bandcamp, including Mr. Everywhere in English, French, Japanese, Spanish, and German versions, the latter of which I'm especially fond. Lastly, a preview of the song Small Pieces is available on iTunes, which may appear on Spooky's In the Works new album. The next podcast's episode of BHA Plus will feature a personal introduction to my upcoming channel, where I outline its mandate and focus, and reveal the first vintage video gear to be reviewed. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook for further alerts and teasing images and video. This podcast was produced by Big Head Amusements, which also offers unique audio and video services, including digitizing analog media, audio and video editing, custom visuals, podcast post-production, and voice work. For inquiries and audio-video samples, please visit bigheadamusements.com and our Facebook page. This interview is copyrighted 2024 by Mark R. Hassan. Thank you for listening.
Don't ask why I'm not going to cry, but mostly I can see that there are peculiar things along the horizon. Make it fun.